Maryland versus Indiana. Indiana under first-year head coach Curt Cignetti is off to a start of 4-0, while Maryland is 3-1 and heads to Bloomington as an underdog. That's kind of crazy. Maryland's new look
Mhm.
offense, led by quarterback Billy Edwards Jr., aims to bounce back in the Big Ten after a home loss to Michigan State a few weeks ago. Indiana's quarterback Curtis Rourke has been stellar, completing 75% of his passes this season despite Indiana's undefeated record. Maryland's defense poses a tough challenge, especially with their strong pass rush and forcing many turnovers. The betting line has Indiana favored by 7, but Maryland's ability to play spoiler makes them look like a compelling underdog pick. Kickoff is at noon on Big Ten Network on this Saturday. Zach, what are some of your thoughts?
I I think you just mentioned Maryland as a spoiler. I will say I think Indiana is not going to be fooled into thinking, "Oh, like we can look past them," right? Like this is the first legitimate test for Indiana. And you can make the argument that going on the road to UCLA is a test because of the travel, it's the first Big Ten opponent. But I think to be fair, I think Indiana and Maryland are probably a bit more around the same talent level. I'm not saying they are the same, but they're in that probably same tier where UCLA, I think, while they do have some talent, I think there's a deficiency there. Plus, I think, with Deshaun Foster and just how new he is, I think it was just going to be a challenge for UCLA, and it's going to continue to be a challenge for UCLA, which we'll talk about later.
Yep.
I think Indiana is going to struggle a bit with Maryland's defense, which has been underrated. Um, I don't think Maryland's gonna win, but I do think Indiana is gonna struggle, and I think it's not gonna look nearly as easy as it has for the first 4 weeks. And I think we're gonna see Curtis Rourke have to deal with some adversity.
Yeah, they've really not had to deal with any of that going into the season so far. I mean, they had that really fast start against UCLA, who would probably be their biggest threat of the season so far.
Mhm.
I would guess, but they had that issue there in the beginning. But they've just been rolling. They really haven't faced any kind of adversity at all. In fact, I just was looking at the numbers earlier today, and this is one of my keys to the game. So we'll just get right into that. Is that Indiana has yet to turn the ball over this year,
Yeah.
not once. And Maryland, they get a lot of takeaways. They average 1.75 takeaways per game, which is good for fifth best in the country. And Indiana has done a very good job of protecting the ball and not allowing other teams to take it away from him. If Maryland is going to win this game, they're going to have to figure out a way to take away the ball from Indiana. Curtis Rourke, it's not like he's just been throwing screen passes and stuff like that. He has a 10.1 average depth of target, which you don't know what that is. That's just how many yards from where the quarterback is throwing to where his receiver is. So 4 yards would be 4, 10 yards would be 10, obviously. It doesn't do like the diagonal stuff. It just says, he threw from the 38-yard line. It was completed at the 48-yard line. That's 10. And so Curtis Rourke is throwing the ball further. He's not just throwing underneath passes. He's not just throwing screens. And on top of that, he only has 2 turnover worthy passes, which is tied for fifth best in the Big Ten.
Mhm.
So you combine those two together, Curtis Rourke has done a very good job of taking care of the ball. Now, he's not been pressured very much lately,
Yep.
and so that's been good for him. So Maryland's going to have to get pressure on Curtis Rourke if they want him to try and make these mistakes that they need in order for them to win the game.
Yeah, and I think so. My thought on this, and I think my prediction is I think Rourke does throw at least one pick, maybe
Mhm.
two. You have Glendon Miller, you have Jalen Husky, you have Dante Trader in that backfield. All of them have recorded interceptions, 6 interceptions between the three of them at defensive back. And I think they're going to get after it a little bit. And I think the key to this game for me is, can Curtis Rourke stay as composed after mistakes like he did against UCLA, which I think he will. But I think that's a key to the game for me is with the uptick in competition going from the MAC to the Big Ten, can Rourke maintain his composure like he has?
Whoops, sorry, I was muted there for a second. Yeah, no, I think that's a huge thing. And then on the other side of the ball, for me with Maryland, it's kind of the same thing because Indiana also averages 1.75 takeaways per game. Now, Billy Edwards, he has been a little bit looser with the ball. However, he is not throwing the ball as far. He has an 8.8 average depth of target, which is eighth in the Big Ten. And then he also has 4 turnover-worthy passes, which is tied for 15th in the Big Ten. So that's unfortunate for Billy Edwards Jr. He has 2 interceptions on the season he's already thrown. If he does want to make a big impact on this game, he's going to have to make sure he takes care of the ball. And honestly, I feel like I am more confident in Curtis Rourke taking care of the ball. However, I think you're right. At some point during this game, there's going to be a fumble. There's going to be something like that that's going to be problematic for Indiana, and they're going to have to find a way to thrive. Zach, I think 2 players, well, 1 player in particular we have to talk about. We just talked about Billy Edwards Jr. 1 player in this game we have to talk about is Ty Felton, right? I mean, this is arguably the best wide receiver, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country. The production he's putting up, I know the argument will always be, well, he's not the most talented. It's actually this guy. Plain and simple, Ty Felton has better numbers than just about everybody else in the country at this point. Yep. So he has touchdowns, he has yards, he has receptions, he has it all. He has yards after catch, he has everything. I mean, what do you think Indiana can do to try and limit Ty Felton or try to take him away? Is there anything they can do?
Well, I mean, I think you can certainly bracket him, but that opens up Caden Prather, which he is a very good receiver in his own right. I think though, and here's I think the key to the game for Maryland is, and this might get to even the mistakes that you could make that I know we're going to get to. I think Ty Felton is dynamic, right? Mm-hmm. But I actually think the key for Maryland is they have to have some sort of running game threat. Yep. Like I think if they go one dimensional, it's going to lead to some of those turnovers. So do I think Felton's going to make an impact in this game? Absolutely. You'd be crazy not to. He's averaging, I think, over 150 yards receiving a game. So, and if you double him, you run the risk of Caden Prather getting loose. Another good receiver. But if you can't run against this Indiana team, they will turn you over. And I think that's honestly, I think part of the defensive strategy is you actually take away the run and force Billy Edwards to beat you through the air over and over and over again. And I don't think they can do it all game long.
Well, and that's what I was going to say about Caden Prather is he's really the only other viable receiving option they have. It's Ty Felton and Caden Prather. Caden Prather has 199 yards receiving on the year. Other than him, there's really nobody else that is catching the ball consistently. Obviously, there's other guys who have caught it, but nobody who's really catching the ball consistently. And he's the only other receiver that has a receiving touchdown on this team. Yeah. So it's been Ty Felton. It's been Caden Prather to some extent. If you're Maryland, you have to get the running game going, which is going to be incredibly difficult against this Indiana team. And that's why I think that if you're Maryland, you have to go with more gap schemes. I mean, that's what they've been better at doing that. And that's how you get guys on the defensive line kind of out of sync and work around them and get to the second level. And even though I think Aiden Fisher is a wonderful linebacker, he does a great job. I think Maryland has a better chance going up against those linebackers at the second level than they do the defensive line of Indiana, just because I think it's that tough. I mean, I think it's that much better than Maryland. We saw Michigan State push Maryland around, which Michigan State, I'm not saying they have a bad defensive line, but I still think Indiana's is better than them. So it's going to be really interesting to see. Zach, let's move on to mistakes. What is one mistake each team must avoid in this matchup? Let's go with Indiana first. What is your one mistake for them?
Yeah, I kind of already mentioned it, but I think it's more mental for them, which is, for Rourke and the team is when they make mistakes, and they will in this game, don't lose composure. Like, don't lose your poise, right? Mm-hmm. When Curtis Rourke, there were several mistakes in that first drive. I keep going back to it, but the low snap, being put in third and long a couple times. The next drive after that throws a near pick, and he just bounced back. Things have gone very easy for them. And so they haven't had to have poise. I think that was one of the few times that they really had much resistance. When things are tough, when the chips are down, do you maintain the same composure? I think that's the thing is the mistake you can make is to let one mistake become three.
I totally agree. I totally agree. My mistake for them is, and this kind of aligns with yours a little bit, is they can't give up the big play. Maryland feasts on the big play. That's what
Yep.
they love. That's what their bread and butter is. If you make Maryland methodically go down the field 8, 10, 12 play drives, I think that's going to be much more difficult for them to do because they don't have that running threat as much, which is why I think Maryland has to be able to run the ball. Zach, what is your mistake for Maryland that they must avoid?
To go away from the running game. I think I think there's going to be a temptation that Felton is our biggest playmaker. So we have to get him X amount of touches. And I don't disagree with that, but I think they have to give at least some threat of the run, even if it's just 2 yards or 3 yards a pop. Because if you can find ways to get to have them forced to stack the box a little bit more, it gives Felton and Prather so much more room to run. Otherwise, you can drop 8 and you can force Billy Edwards into mistakes and you can get to Edwards and sack him. And that, if they don't run the ball at least 3.5 yards a carry, 4 yards a carry, this could get away from them very quickly.
Very true. Very true. My mistake for Maryland goes similar with yours. You can't just keep dropping back the entire time with Billy Edwards Jr., which I know they haven't done that all season, so I'm not saying they've done that all season. But this Indiana defensive line is going to be able to get pressure on Billy Edwards Jr. if it's just them. Indiana's not going to have to blitz. In my mind, Indiana's not going to have to blitz to do this. So you're going to have to be rolling out Billy Edwards Jr. You're going to have to get him on the move. There's going to have to be some creativity there. You're going to have to go to one side of the field and have your receivers running. And you're also going to have to help him out, maybe some screens, something like that, to get the ball out of Billy Edwards' hands quick to Ty Felton, so that way you can let Ty Felton make the plays that he has been making all season long. So,
yep.
All right, Zach, let's go to a couple comments fast, and then we'll get to our score predictions. We got Billy Edwards in the house. Says, howdy, gentlemen. Hello, Billy. Glad to have you here. William asked if we did Rutgers yet. Nope, we're going to do Rutgers third. Right, Zach? What have I done? Yeah,
I think
third.
so.
We have UCLA, Oregon next, and then we'll do that. Philip says Indiana's first opponent with a pulse. Yeah, both them and Ohio State both didn't play teams with a pulse. But Danny Cannell just mentioned Ohio State though. He didn't mention Indiana. So John Jacob says is Maryland's secondary is weak, then Indiana will feast on this. Maryland's secondary is not great, other than they do get turnovers. So that's going to be the big thing with it, like we mentioned, right?
Yeah. They're not terrible though.
Right. No, I'm not saying they're bad.
Yeah,
they're not bad.
Yeah.
But if they don't get turnovers, they definitely can have, Curtis Rourke can throw the ball on them.
Yeah.
John Jacobs says, I trust Rourke, the receivers, and to a certain extent running backs for Indiana. What I don't know for certain is everyone else. Well, I think that defensive line and linebackers are good. I think that's going to be a big thing for them, and we'll see how the offensive line does as well. So, and look at this. We got Brian Myers here with us. Hello, Brian. Good to see you. And then Sound the Siren. This is our Washington podcast from the College Huddle. So go check out Sound the Siren podcast. It says, good evening from our colleagues in the most northwestern school in the Big Ten, I guess.
That was a well-placed comment, Hooligan. Well done.
Well done, Hooligan. Well done. All right. I think that's most of the comments there. And William says Indiana has the coaching edge for sure. I agree. Curt Cignetti.
Yeah.
I would definitely rather have him over Mike Locksley. I apologize, Maryland fans, if you feel differently, but I don't feel differently. Kent says, JR, come watch me, Dylan, in NCAA after you're done. We're about to start. No one leaving until we're done, though. Yeah, we'll have a mass group go over to watch Kent and Dylan play.
Is that live streaming?
Yeah, I think they're live streaming it. That would be really fun to watch. So
yeah,
they're pretty entertaining together. All right, Zach.
Wait, Ken, go ahead. Drop the link for that in the chat for later.
Yeah, everybody just right click, open a new tab, mute it. Stay here. Yeah. All right, Zach, let's get to some score predictions. I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Oh, yeah. Let me go first so you can dunk on. No, I'm kidding. I've got 28-24 Indiana. I think I was tempted to have a higher margin of victory. but I do think Maryland's gonna hit a couple big plays. I do think Rourke is gonna turn the ball over at least once, maybe even twice. And I think Indiana is gonna have to drive the ball a bit more, but I think that's actually where Indiana has the advantage, right? I think they can run. I think they'll be able to hit intermediate passes, and I think they'll tire Maryland's defense out. And so I could even see it being 28-17 in the fourth quarter, and Maryland gets a score late, and then Indiana kind of just kills the clock as the game runs out. So I think it's close, but I don't know if the score I don't know if it's as close as the score is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I think my score prediction I had written down was 34-17 in favor of Indiana. However, I will say if Curtis Rourke does turn the ball over, then for me it could be like a 27-21 or something like that, a little bit closer. But I don't know how to feel about Curtis Rourke and turn the ball over. I think he's been very good this entire time. We're just going to have to see if Maryland makes the plays
Yeah,
to do that. Young Bucket does bring up a good point. He says Maryland turnovers are inflated because they're playing Calandria and Childs, both two guys
that's
that don't
fair.
take care of the ball very well. So I'm of the opinion you still have to make the plays. So, like, yes, you do play guys who put the ball in harm's way a little bit more, but if the opportunity presents itself, you're still making the plays. So I think that'll be a big thing with Maryland is do the opportunities present themselves so that way they can make the plays.